إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Praise be to Allah. We seek His help and His forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil of our own souls and from our own bad deeds. Whomsoever Allah guides will never be led astray, and whomsoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, the one having no partner, and I bear witness that Muhammad is His slave and messenger. Allahumma allimna al-kitaba wal-hikmah wa faqihni fi ad-din. Oh Allah, teach me the book and wisdom and grant me understanding of the religion. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan tayyiban wa amalan mutaqabbala. Oh Allah, I ask you for beneficial knowledge, goodly provision and acceptable deeds. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah, today we are going to be starting with Surah Al-Fil. I hope you all had a good little break. We had a Eid al-Adha break. And then there was a public holiday. So I hope, inshallah, that everyone's had a good break and ready to jump back into routine. But unfortunately, we only have 2 weeks of class, and then we're going to have another 2 weeks of the school holidays. So today is going to be Surah Al-Fil, and next week is going to be Surah Al-Humazah. It is a very deep tafseer, Surah Al-Humazah, very detailed and very, very relevant, especially for us women who maybe have an issue with backbiting, and we don't really realize that we do it. And sometimes it becomes like a natural habit where we really don't pay attention to how major of a sin is. So today is Surah Al-Fil, and next week extremely important for Surah Al-Humazah, inshallah. So I'm going to start as usual with reciting this surah, and then I'll recite it again. And I want you to really, really try to see if you can imagine the meaning of this surah the next time that I read it at the end of the lesson, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. So first of all, I'm going to introduce the surah as usual with a bit of background before I delve into the verse by verse tafsir, inshallah. So this chapter is the 105th chapter of the Quran. It's Meccan. This chapter refers to a historical event that took place prior to the birth of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so it's actually this surah is referring to an event that took place prior to the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, on the year of his birth, in fact. So in fact, it took place of the year that the Prophet was born, and that's why we say that the Prophet was born on the year of the elephant, because back then they didn't have the names of the month very similar to what we know now, the Islamic months, and we've also got January, February, March, April, those kind of months. They didn't have that. So they used to name a month based on a particular big event that took place. And the year that the Prophet ﷺ was born, the big event that took place is the story of the elephant, which we're going to look at today. What happened was the Christian leader of Yemen by the name of Abraha, he was becoming really jealous. So many people from around the world were traveling to Mecca in order to make pilgrimage to the Kaaba. Okay, so even though the Arabs from Yemen were they're really enthusiastic, and they were traveling to Mecca to see the Kaaba. Don't forget that at this point, the Prophet ﷺ was not born. So people were going to the Kaaba not to do Hajj, what we know today as Hajj. They were actually doing tawaf around the Kaaba, around, to worship the statues, to worship the idols. So when I talk about they were doing Hajj, they were not doing Hajj like we are going to Mecca to do Hajj. They would actually travel from around the world to come to Mecca so that they can worship the idols and slaughter animals for the sake of these idols. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So this king, he wanted people to come to Yemen. So he was getting like a little bit jealous that all these people from around the world, including from his own country, were actually going to Mecca to make, Hajj, and he wanted everyone to come to Yemen. He wanted everyone to be distracted to come to him. So what did he do? He built this really big church, a really luxurious church, okay, in his area to compete with the Kaaba instead of Mecca. And he thought that this would also bring about a lot of economic benefits to Yemen due to tourism that it would lead to. And this was happening to Mecca. Remember, the main reason why the people in Mecca, the Quraysh, did not want to have one God to worship Allah was because it was going to bring about a lot of economical harm to their country. So Abraham was thinking the same thing. It's all about money, okay? It's all about money. So he wanted people to start coming to Yemen so that they would do Hajj there, and more business would come to his country, bringing about, economic benefit. So this big cathedral was so grand and huge, and the ceilings were so high that, people standing outside couldn't actually see all the way to the top. And he decorated it with a lot of gold, a lot of silver, and a lot of precious gems. And it was meant to be like a masterpiece. It wasn't just a church. It was supposed to be a masterpiece that everyone from around the world talks about. Okay. And that's why people build these really big buildings. People don't build really big buildings to, accommodate for lots of residents. That's not the reason why people build this. It's all about competition. So, like I said, remember that before Muhammad's prophethood, the Kaaba was like a shrine, okay, and it contained hundreds of idols. So people from around the world would travel to Mecca to visit their gods, and they would ask their gods for help, and they would sacrifice animals for their gods. And then they'll do a little bit of shopping, buy a few little bit of gods here and there, and then take them back home. Okay, so just say they couldn't have children, they would buy the god that was known for bringing about pregnancy. Okay, or your business was not doing well, they would buy the god that would bring about rizq. This is how these people function. They would travel to Mecca to do Hajj for these reasons, and they would slaughter animals at the Kaaba for the sake of their idols. Okay, so when we go to the Kaaba now, alhamdulillah, it's clear from all these idols. And if everyone remembers, when exactly did all these idols become destroyed? Think about it. It was in a recent surah that we did, and we talked about when it was in Fatah Makkah. Okay, at Fatah Makkah, that's when all the idols were destroyed. Okay, so the Kaaba is a very simple structure, and it's surrounded by worshippers going around the Kaaba. And inside the Kaaba right now, is there anything really amazing inside the Kaaba? Actually, if you look at the PowerPoint on the screen, you'll actually see a picture, two pictures that show you inside the Kaaba. If you notice that there's actually nothing very special inside. It's actually very ordinary. It's very simple. There's just 3 pillars inside that support the roof, and a few suspended silver and gold lamps. So there's nothing really special inside the Kaaba, okay? It isn't decked out with anything fancy. It's about 13 by 19 meters wide and about 11 meters high. That's pretty much the whole structure for those who haven't visited it. The door, however, it's made out of solid gold, and it's about 2 meters from the ground level. So this door isn't the original door of the Kaaba. It wasn't always made out of gold. It wasn't always in that position, but it was, modified. A few people are privileged enough to enter the Kaaba. They do open it once or twice a year, but really, there's nothing really inside the Kaaba that's of any special religious significance. Of course, you feel very special and honored to go inside. Of course, who wouldn't? But the important thing is that we visit the Kaaba and we do our duty and go to Hajj, and I'll do our duty and go to Umrah, because it's our duty, that if we are financially able, that we must go and visit the Kaaba and do Hajj. And for those who have not gone Hajj, I know it is obviously it's ridiculously expensive at the moment, and we're all aware of that. But if we have to choose between upgrading our car or building our house or going on holiday, we need to prioritize. And the priority is Hajj. The priority is Hajj. I repeat it, it is Hajj. So if you have not gone to Hajj, you should be doing everything in your power to have, maybe like a savings account where you are constantly in a consecutive manner saving and saving. Because if you are doing that where you're saving and you're preparing to go to Hajj, inshallah, you will not be held accountable. But if you are doing nothing to prepare yourself for Hajj, then you will be held accountable. And we should all be also doing Umrah and Hajj at least once in our lifetime. So back to the story of the elephant. Abraha had even forbidden anyone from Yemen, from his own country, to go to Mecca in order to visit the Kaaba. That is the extent of his jealousy. So the story goes that someone from the Arab tribe who was from Mecca, they got really annoyed at Abraha's attempt to direct everyone's attention to his church rather than the Kaaba. So he was getting really annoyed and frustrated. So he did something that wasn't correct, okay? He defecated, so he pooed in Abraha's church as a way of making fun of Abraha's silly attempt of bringing people to his church instead of the Kaaba. And obviously, this wasn't a very pleasant thing. And this, obviously really angered Abraha. This is not a good thing to do, obviously. But anyway, it was prior to Islam. I don't know who the individual is, but it was from someone from Mecca. So Abraha decided to invade Mecca and attack and destroy the Kaaba. So at the beginning, his intention was to distract people from going to the Kaaba to come to Yemen. But now, since that person enraged him, he said, that's it, I'm just going to destroy the Kaaba altogether. So he actually prepared an army of 60,000 soldiers brought with elephants. So he actually had elephants with him. Now these elephants are a strategy to entice fear in the Meccans, because many people had never actually seen an elephant in real life before. I mean, ask yourself, if you hadn't gone to Taronga Zoo or whatever zoo it was, and just say there was no TV, there were no magazines, there were no pictures, okay? How would you ever know how an elephant looks like? I mean, people would describe it to you and how majestic and how large and huge and enormous and scary. It's really, really, really big, okay? Like sometimes when you see it on the TV, it looks really small, but in real life, it's actually really, really big. So, elephants are really large and they're really powerful, and they can crush a person in a second. So when someone sees these animals in real life for the first time in an army, it can be very, very scary. So these animals, they could crush a huge structure with ease. Why? Due to their strength. They're very, very strong. In fact, elephants have been used by non-Muslims in some wars, and they caused a lot of damage to the Muslims, and they killed many great Muslims. So using elephants in war is definitely a strategy used to bring about fear in the opponent. And it's very similar to like the modern day tank, okay? It's really big. It's very tough, very hard to destroy. You can shoot people, it can bring about damage. So I guess you can compare it to a modern day tank. So he came all the way from Yemen to Mecca through the desert with the intention of destroying the Kaaba. That was his intention. So the Meccans, they were aware of Abraha's intention. So they obviously found out that he's doing this and that he's coming to Mecca to destroy the Kaaba. News travels very, very fast. And in fact, they actually want people to know that they're coming. Sometimes they don't want to do a surprise attack. They want to entice fear beforehand. So on the way, Abraha also managed to capture about some 200 camels that belonged to the Prophet Muhammad's grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. So he managed to seize 200 camels that belonged to Abdul Muttalib. And this really annoyed Abdul Muttalib. So what they did was there was a meeting that took place between Abraha and Abdul Muttalib, because this is like war. Just because you see the enemy doesn't mean you're, obviously straight away going to attack them. You still have meetings, and we know that in the past in wars that we've seen, like the leaders meet up and they discuss some agreements before the war actually takes place. So it's not like just because the two leaders see each other, they're just going to kill each other. That's not how it works. So Abdul Muttalib, he really tried to negotiate with Abraha to leave the Kaaba alone, but Abraha, he refused. Okay, so we tried to convince him. We didn't just kill him. He tried to convince him, look, leave the Kaaba alone. It's God's house. But Abraha, he refused. He said, no, everyone's coming there. Someone defecated in my cathedral. No, I'm going to destroy it. Then Abdul Muttalib, then he demanded that his camels be returned to him. And eventually, Abraha actually agreed to give back the camels on the condition that Abdul Muttalib wouldn't intervene in Abraha destroying the Kaaba. Okay, so subhanAllah, literally, Abdul Muttalib said that, okay, I'm here to get my camels. That's mine, that belongs to me. Allah will protect the Kaaba. Allah is the Lord of the Kaaba, and I am the Lord of the camels. I'm here to get my camels back, and I don't really need to protect the Kaaba because it belongs to Allah anyway. Don't forget that they still believed in Allah. Okay, it's just that they were mushrikeen. They committed shirk. They believed in Allah along with associating partners, which takes someone outside of the fold of Islam. But don't forget, they did believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the next morning, Abraham marched to the Kaaba to destroy it with his elephants. But guess what? His elephants, they wouldn't walk towards the direction of the Kaaba. How amazing. They would not walk towards the direction of the Kaaba. So the elephant agreed to walk towards other directions, left, right, backwards, but he wouldn't go towards the Kaaba to destroy it. So the soldiers, they're finding this very strange. They even tried hurting the elephants with iron spears, but the elephants, they just wouldn't budge. So Abraha's plan actually backfired, because that was his strategy to scare everyone with these big elephants and to actually crush everyone. So the people some of his soldiers were sitting on the elephants, and their plan was to go and destroy anyone that tried to protect the Kaaba, and to actually destroy the Kaaba, like destroying a building. So he backfired. His plan backfired, and he couldn't get his army of elephants to attack the Kaaba. And at that same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a flock of birds who were carrying stones of baked clay in their beaks and their claws to Abraha and his army. And these birds, they threw the rocks at the army until the army was destroyed completely. These stones, they came at such speed, they were literally like bullets. So even though they were really small in size, they were coming at speed. The elephants ran off at the sight of these birds, and they left their army to be attacked by these stones. And this event can be returned. You can actually consider this event as a mu'jiza. In case you haven't heard of this word before, mu'jiza means a miracle. It's an abnormal event which took place, so it's called a mu'jiza. So this mu'jiza, this miracle, took place on the year of the elephant, the year that the Prophet Muhammad was born, as a way of introducing a very special individual into this world, who would be a prophet for all of mankind. So now we're going to start, inshallah, with the verse by verse tafsir. Inshallah, that gave you a little bit of background knowledge on Surah Al-Fil. So remember, the word fil means elephants. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم ترى كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل. Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with the people of the elephant? So in this verse, Allah refers to himself by the name as what? Rabb. If you notice in that verse, it says, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka. So the word Rabb, and then attached to a ka, which I'll explain. So the word Rabb is mentioned here, Allah's name, Rabb. So, subhanAllah, notice how many times we have discussed Allah's name, Rabb. Over the last few chapters, we have come across this name, Rabb, so many times. So many times. And it really highlights the importance of this name. And I hope that you've, memorized the meaning of Allah's name, Ar-Rabb. And if in case you haven't, it means the Lord. And we said previously that this means that Allah is our Lord, our Master. He owns us and He is in charge of us. Okay? Rabb is also the one who takes care of others and He gives them gifts. And these are all explanations of Allah's name, the Lord, Ar-Rabb. Okay? In this verse, Allah is reminding the Prophet ﷺ of the event which took place of the year of his birth. So this verse is directed to the Prophet because it's through the word Rabbuka. So we said the Rabb means Lord, but the word here is Rabbuka. So you will notice, if you can read it in Arabic, after Rabb, there's a kaf that is attached to Allah's name, Rabbuka. So that ka has been added to Rabb. It's called the second person pronoun, and it indicates that Allah is speaking to Muhammad. So Allah is speaking to Muhammad. That's why that ka is there, to your Lord. So in simple language, we're not going to be discussing a grammar lesson right here, but very, very simple language. If we say kitabu, or kitab is a book. When we say kitabuka, it means your book. Okay, so when we add like the ka, it indicates that you either own something or you're speaking to someone. Okay, similar to when you say means mom, and then ummuka is like your mother. Okay, so although the Prophet ﷺ could not have possibly witnessed this event with his own eyes, obviously he wasn't born, he definitely knew all about this event. Everyone in Mecca knew about the day when Abraha came to destroy the Kaaba. It was a very well documented historical event, very similar to when we hear about World War I, World War II, and lots of events that took place in history. We weren't there. We didn't see it happening, but everyone knows about it. So we know it actually took place. The next verse, أَلَمْ يَجْعَلْ كَيْدَهُمْ فِي تَضْلِيلٍ. Did He not make their plan go wrong? Allah is reminding the Prophet ﷺ that although like such a superpower, Abraha, a really big, unbeatable army came to destroy the Kaaba, Allah destroyed their plan. And it's a really, it's a really big reminder for us to never give up hope. For how many times in history have we seen a really small army destroy a really huge army? It's many times. It's not in number. It's not about number. And the battle of Badr, it's just like one example that it's not about numbers. If Allah wants something to happen, it'll happen. Sometimes you will be in a really, like think about it, with yourself personally. You'll be in a really stuck situation and you think, how am I going to get out of this one? Boy, how am I going to get out of this one? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets you out of it and you're like, where did this come from? So when you thought that there was no hope, but Allah is the miracle maker. So it will happen. So whether an army is large and well equipped or not, Allah just needs to say, kun, be, and it happens according to what He wants it to happen. Allah is the miracle maker. Nothing is too hard for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is really extremely important in our time now, as we see what's happening in Gaza, with the siege, by such a superpower, by such a dominating force who has worldwide control over most countries. But when Allah decides, He will allow that military power to be destroyed. And it's all in Allah's hand. And our job is to do our part. What's our part? Make dua, speak about it, try to assist in any way that we can, like, signing petitions, attending rallies, protests, voicing our concerns on social media and so on, anything that, we're able to do. And then we leave the rest to Allah. We don't become depressed. We don't lose hope. We don't do that. This is not the job of a Muslim. A Muslim never gives up hope in Allah. Allah has a plan, and we don't know when that plan, will happen, when Gaza will be free, but it will. And we don't know how long that siege will last for. But the point is that we don't lose hope in Allah's wisdom. Allah has a plan, and Allah is wise. And we actually, as humans, we don't have a mental capacity to understand why Allah does things. Okay, we actually don't understand. It's like when something bad happens, when someone gets sick or dies, or someone has an accident. On the outside, we see it as an evil. Obviously, we're not going to see that someone getting cancer as a very lovely thing. But Allah has a plan, and Allah knows what He's doing. There is khair in Allah's plan, but it's just that our mental capacity can't comprehend it. And that's why also sometimes, children, they don't understand as mothers why we do things, or we tell them to do things. And at the end of the day, as mothers, we do what's best for our kids, and we expect that they're not going to argue and lose trust in our decision making, correct? So we expect, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects that you do not lose hope in His decision making. Similarly, Allah is also the all-wise, Al-Hakim. He has a well-calculated plan, and Allah is executing His wise plan. And when Allah deems it fit to destroy the enemy and free Gaza, then that's going to happen. And like I said, don't ever lose hope in Allah's wisdom. Don't ever question why Allah does things and accuse Allah of being unfair. This is very, very dangerous. Very dangerous to have it in your heart that you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unfair. And this goes back to even little things like jealousy. When you see someone that has something more than you, like someone has a very nice anything, car, jewelry, whatever it is, bag, and you're thinking, well, I've been working for 20 years and I haven't earned that. She's only been working for 1 year, 2 years, or no years at all, and she got that. We cannot question Allah's wisdom. How do you know what good deed that she did, that maybe she earned that? Maybe she's been praying Qiyam al-Layl, and you haven't, and Allah is rewarding her. Maybe Allah is testing her. So we just have to always, never ever think that Allah is being unfair. And another one of Allah's name that we should refer to here is Al-Adl, the most just. And He will give the people of Gaza the justice that they deserve. And finally, the last name of Allah I'm going to mention here is Al-Muntaqim, the avenger. Allah will avenge the Gazans and all the people who are oppressed. And after Allah, these are all Allah's names that we should really, really memorize the meanings of, especially in times when people are being oppressed. And then when you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the just and the avenger, and He's very wise, then you'll have ease knowing that it's all in Allah's hands. So I feel at ease now. So we just need to be patient and just do our part. وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ. Then Allah sent against them swarms of birds. So the word طير, if you see in the verse, وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا. So the word طير. طير means birds. Ababil means swarms, like a huge flock. So Allah sent upon the army of Abraham a huge flock of birds, similar to the size of pigeons. So they weren't like really, really big. They were size of pigeons. And it was through these pigeon-sized birds, really little birds, that an entire army of military power was destroyed. So subhanAllah, they were so great that the people of Mecca, they couldn't even stop them, but the birds actually was able to stop them. And isn't that so amazing that, never think that you're completely defeated. So long as you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are never, ever defeated. تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ. They were throwing at them rocks of baked clay. So these birds, they had in their beaks and in their claws really little, small rocks, like pebbles. And even some people say that they were as small as grains of sand. Allahu Alam. We don't know exactly, but all we know is that they were really, really small. Okay, tiny stones that are described with the attributes of clay. Okay, because it says clay stones. So is clay stones very strong? or very fragile? What do you think? Like if you got something that was made out of clay and you threw it on the ground, is it as strong as metal or would it actually break? So baked clay is actually very fragile, okay? And it falls apart. However, when they were thrown from a really high distance, when they were shot down, they came down like bullets, that they penetrated the bodies of the soldiers and they destroyed them all. And it doesn't matter whether these small rocks were made out of wool or steel. You know, after all, it was Allah that sent these birds with the stones as a means of destroying the army. So whether Allah sent something very strong or very weak, at the end of the day, it was Allah that sent it. And if Allah sent it, then it's powerful. So although in our minds, it's kind of like our weak minds, a flock of birds couldn't possibly destroy an army. Like that's what our mind says. But at the end of the day, who are we to say that? These birds are soldiers of Allah. The wind is a soldier of Allah. Germs and viruses are a soldier of Allah. King Nimrod was destroyed by a mosquito, for God's sake. The whole world went into lockdown because of a germ of COVID, So what makes us think that an army couldn't be destroyed by birds? If these birds are soldiers of Allah, then they're strong. Allah is capable of everything. He is a miracle maker. So when you hear about this story, never ever for a moment think to yourself, oh, how could these little tiny rocks destroy an army? Well, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent that, and he did, then most definitely, they were destroyed. فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. He left them, leaving them like chewed up leaves. So Allah then describes the state that this army was in after their destruction. So Allah uses the adjectives to describe like a really vivid like image in our mind. And subhanAllah, Allah does that a lot in the Quran. Allah, subhanAllah, he uses a lot of descriptions describing Jannah and describing Jahannam. Like if you read verses that talk about Jannah, your heart is just melting and then you're just crying, wanting to go there. And then when you read about verses of Jahannam, you are literally crying, shaking, so scared that you don't want to, that you might be an inhabitant of Jahannam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses a lot of these adjectives in the Quran, quite a fair bit. And it's not there to fill up word counts in the Quran to make a thick book. That's not why Allah uses these words. It is so that you have this vivid image in your mind. Okay? So Allah uses adjective to describe this image in our mind of the result of the person who tried to lay their hand on the house of God. So Allah describes the army looking like chewed up leaves. And the word for that is asf, which means straw or chaff. And I've put the pictures of like what chaff is and straw is in case you want to see how it looks like. So chaff is actually the outer part of grains, like wheat, okay? And ma'kul means eaten up or chewed. So imagine seeing chaff that's chewed up. And that's how this army ended up looking like after their destruction. Like a bulldozer drove over them. So they came to Mecca as a mighty, powerful force, and Allah degraded them by being destroyed by these little birds. Subhanallah, how humiliating. So in summary, this chapter, it's reminding us that it's reminding the Prophet ﷺ of Allah's might and Allah's power, and how he has the ability to destroy the most powerful of armies. Allah can destroy people and armies and superpowers in the most surprising ways ever imagined. And there's nothing that is more powerful than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And through this surah, Allah is warning arrogant people in this world that they can never, ever stand against the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They need to submit to Allah and they need to accept the truth when they see it. And this surah also instills in the heart of people the love towards the Quraysh, who were the custodians of the Kaaba. And that's why the Quraysh were respected, actually, because of their duty to protect the Kaaba. And from the tribe of the Quraysh, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born from their lineage. And this means that, and this man, he was a prophet, and he would be the custodian of the Kaaba. So I'm going to now just end this tafsir by rereading Surah Al-Fil again. And I'm going to read it a little bit slower. And I want you to just focus on each verse and try to remember the meaning of what I said, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. So that is the end of this surah. Since we have a little bit of time for those who would like to stay, I'm going to just do a really quick revision of Surah Al-Ikhlas, and I'm going to do that whenever our tafsir ends early, because I think it's a good idea to revisit some of our old surahs that we've done to revise it, inshallah. So the revision that I'm going to quickly do is of Surah Al-Ikhlas. So I'll recite the surah first, and then I'll look at a very brief meaning of each verse, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. So the word ikhlas, we said it means monotheism, which this word monotheism, it translates into the oneness of Allah. So when you hear that we are a monotheistic religion, we are a religion who focuses on believing in one God, the oneness of Allah. Ikhlas also means purity. So when a person gives up shirk, they've actually purified themselves from worshipping more than one God, and they've become now a monotheist. So the first ayah, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say he is Allah the One. Here Allah is telling Muhammad to make an announcement through the word قُل, which means say to who? To mankind. That there is only one God. Muhammad was actually responding to the Quraysh's challenge, if you remember before, to describe Allah. So this verse is actually answering their question. They were saying, who is Allah? Who exactly is Allah? Like, we want to know, is it the same person, the same God that we worship? So this was the response. Then the next verse, Allahu Samad. Allah, God, he's the eternal, the sustainer. Allah goes on to describe himself. Who is he? He is As-Samad. This is one of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's beautiful names. So what does As-Samad actually mean? As-Samad has a few meanings. We said firstly, it means the eternal, the one who lives forever and ever and ever. And everything will die except Allah, and that's because of him, Allah being eternal. The one who is eternal was the first and is the last, and he is in full control. The second meaning of As-Samad is independence and self-sufficiency. So these are the two main meanings of As-Samad: independence and self-sufficiency, and eternity. So like I said, Muhammad was answering the question that the Quraysh would, they asked, who is Allah? So now he's actually explaining who Allah is. So Muhammad is explaining to them that Allah is not like your gods, who have rivals and family members and they have the dependence, on each other. He's the only God, one, and he is Allah. The next verse, Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He has never had offspring, nor was he born. So this verse is directed at the polytheists who have many gods, and also the Christians, because they believe that God has a son. So the Prophet ﷺ is confirming that God, Allah, doesn't have a family. He's not in need of a family anyway. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. And there is none comparable to him. So this verse means that no one slightly can even be comparable to Allah, let alone similar to him in Allah's power or his abilities. No one is similar to him. So the last verse of this chapter makes it really clear as black and white that Allah is not like anything else that they're worshipping. He is one, he is self-sufficient, he is eternal, he is Allah. And that is the end of that very, very quick little revision of Surah Al-Ikhlas. So سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.